Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to the channel for the Smite 2 Closed Alpha 8 update notes. Of course, this is the Aphrodite, Pele, and Medusa patch, but there's a bunch of balance, some really big balance actually that's going to impact the game a ton, and some other things as well. And this update should be targeted for going live probably around the time this video goes live. It's going to be going out today, so you'll be able to play on it. That'll be pretty cool. I'll also be live on Twitch streaming this update when it does go live, probably shortly after this video goes up. So definitely come say hi on Twitch, check out the update and stuff. I'll link that down below. But without further ado, let's jump into the patch notes. So first up, they have updated the minion last hit presentation. So it's basically, I tried this on the PTS. It's gone from like that weird like bracket targeter that appears around them to basically their health bar changes to a slightly lighter red when they're in execute range. It sounds kind of wild, but honestly, I like the change. I think it's good. It's just a lot cleaner. You can still pretty easily see when a minion is in the last hit range for your auto attacks and stuff. So I think this is a good change. Item auto upgrade notification in match. That's good too. And a new accolade for deicides. Conquest changes. They have fixed the Totem of Coup bug where percent HP damage abilities were just like one-shotting it basically, so that's good. No more red buff or percent HP damage, just one-shotting it. But moving into the new gods, I will cover these relatively briefly in this video just because I do have a video already going over what they look like in game, what all of the changes are and stuff. But yeah, for Aphrodite, she's going to be entirely intelligence scaling, no surprise there. The new passive meter, basically instead of like it being individual hearts, it just shows you the number of people that you're near as a number, and you can also see your soulmate as well on the new passive meter, which is cool. Kiss, a locked on ally kiss will now hit enemies it hits along the way. If this happens, the full length of the cooldown will be applied. So yeah, basically, if you are trying to link to someone and it goes through an enemy, it will stun that enemy and trigger the long cooldown. In Smite 1, basically, it will go through the enemy, kiss your ally, and not trigger the long cooldown, but you won't get the stun as well, so that's just a different mechanic there. And also, if you are linked to an ally for 4 seconds or longer, when you switch to a new linked target, both allies will become jealous, so you can get a little bit of extra jealousy bonus. For her too, if you hit both areas of back off in a single fire, you'll do 25% bonus damage. Previously, you would get no benefit for hitting both areas of your back off. Int scaling is returning to Lovebirds, so you're going to be able to get a little bit of int scaling on that. The heal is stronger on int scaling for Aphrodite herself and a little bit weaker for allies. And for her ultimate, you can now refire the ability while the buff is active to fly to your ally's location, and you are untargetable while flying, so you can group up with your ally after you've ulted. For Medusa, she is going to be hybrid scaling, and she seems like she has some really strong intelligence scaling. We tried it out on the PTS on stream. It seems like building int on her is going to be very good. Her int scalings are super high. Definitely seems like she's going to work as a mid laner with like a Book of Thoth style build with like maybe a Soul Reaver, Chronos Pen, and that kind of stuff. And she will probably work relatively well with a double stacking build as well, because of course strength scales your auto attacks, and her abilities do have some strength scaling, but also some int scaling as well. For the one, each successful hit reduces the cooldown by 0.5 seconds, so this is flat cooldown reduction. It's very strong. If you have a lot of cooldown already in your build, it's going to be even more powerful. And also the attack speed stim now scales with strength. So if you are building a bit of strength in maybe a standard ability based build, or if you're going for more of a strength attack speed like standard hunter build, that's probably not the way to go with Medusa, I don't think, but if you are doing that, you'll get even more attack speed from this ability. The 2 is unchanged. The 3, you can now instantly destroy statues by 3ing through them, and she does have some new mechanics with the statues. That's the reason this works. I'm not sure if it's actually listed here, but I believe the 3 will get a 5-second cooldown refund whenever you destroy a statue with it. So if you want to dash aggressively through a statue, you're going to get a substantial cooldown refund on the 3. This is not in the notes, but they did show it on the Titan Talk. I believe it's going to be a feature. Oh, it's down here. That's why. So statues are created when killing an enemy god, regardless of if they were stunned or not. If they were slowed or hit by the damage, you're going to be able to create a statue with the ultimate as well, as long as they die, of course. And then whenever a statue is destroyed, the cooldown of Lacerate is reduced by 5 seconds, like I just mentioned. And Medusa gains a 10-second strength and int buff, and also a permanent stack of strength and int. So basically, you want to be destroying those statues. You can probably tactically do it. Make sure you get this buff in a team fight. And, you know, maybe you ult someone, you kill them immediately. You can dash through the statue, get that strength and int buff, reduce the cooldown of your dash by 5 seconds, use it aggressively. And finally, we have Pele, who's going to be entirely strength scaling. There's no int for Pele in Smite 2. The 1 got a slight change to where if you basically are inside the deployable that Pyrocrest leaves behind, where it starts firing back the projectiles, the enemy god will take damage. Previously, like, they would spawn in a weird way, where generally if you were like right on top of the projectile that it spawns, you wouldn't take the damage. Eruption is the main +1 for Pele though, so firing this ability while in the amplified stage of Magma Rush will cause Pele to dash a short distance before erupting, sorry. So yeah, basically you get a small dash. It's very short. It's just a little sort of like maybe Achilles 3 length dash. You can use that to get in if you're using the amplified 3. And also with the 3, there's a bit less delay on it. There was previously a little bit of delay before you could start like getting the magma rush out when you press 3. Now it's going to come out basically instantly and you can cancel it whenever you want. And yeah, the ultimate is basically the same. The main change with Pele is this short dash on using eruption. Moving into balance. So we did go over balance in a previous video, but they have adjusted some things based on feedback from that initial like round of balance. So we'll go over it again here. So Anubis, they have decreased the stun duration on his 2 and the int scaling on the initial blast of his ult. Baron, they have decreased the percent missing health heal scaling from 15% cooldown rate down to 10% cooldown rate. So this is definitely a new change from the initial notes that we saw. This was something that was given feedback on. I said this. And this is good. This is definitely a large frustration point from Baron. The amount that this can heal when he's at low health with a high cooldown rate build is just kind of insane. Rapid up is going to 16 seconds at all ranks instead of 16 down to 14. And then his ultimate is going up to 110 seconds and decreasing the hysteria applied per tick. Danzaburo gets an extra 55% strength damage scaling on his first basic attack after transforming into a leaf, which is cool, and they have decreased the cooldown of the 3 also to 14 at all ranks instead of 16 down to 14. Hercules gets 5% more strength on Driving Strike, 5 more base damage at all ranks on Earthbreaker, and increased attack speed on Mitigate Wounds. Loki takes a 5% strength scaling nerf on Vanish. This is 4 ticks, so it's a 20% nerf in total, and Flurry Strike goes from 8 to 9 seconds. Mordred's buffer and debuff duration on Blood Rage goes from 4, it's now going to scale up to 6. And they've also removed the self-slow on Channeling Heart Slash, which is really cool. Nuar, they have decreased the movement speed buff duration from Fog from 5 down to 4. They have decreased the Soldier health scaling from 25% of Nuar's health to 20, but they have also decreased the cooldown of Shining Metal, so it's a bit of a shift for Nuar. She gets a buff in this area, but nerfs in these areas. Poseidon, they have increased the Trident from 10 to 15 seconds, which is really good. This is a change I called for. It's 15 seconds in Smite 1, and I think that's where it should be in Smite 2 as well. And with the cooldown nerfs that we'll get to in a second, it's going to be very hard to get permanent uptime on Trident now, whereas it was extremely easy before. Whirlpool, they have also increased the cooldown, so it's now 15 scaling down to 11, so you're actually going to have to rank up this ability to get it to a relatively low cooldown. For Sobek, Charge Parade no longer scales down in cooldown to 14, it's just 16 at all ranks. Susano's buff, debuff on Storm's Edge is going up in duration from 3 to 4, and also the knock-up height on Typhoon is going up by 25%, which is good. It always felt this ability was relatively, like, unimpactful, especially compared to its Smite 1 variant, so this will give a little bit more of an impact. Morrigan, they have decreased the initial hit and mark damage by 5 at all ranks and 5% in scaling, and also decreased the minion damage by 10 at all ranks. Yamoja's Mending Waters, the 2, they have decreased the shield health scaling from 5% max health to 3%, and Zeus Chain Lightning, 10% int per hit off of that. Moving into items, though, first up, we have 3 new items for this update. So, Eros Bow is a, like, attack speed support item, or attack speed tank item. 300 health, 30% attack speed for 2300 gold, and active, you mark an allied god for 10 seconds. Each basic attack that you hit with an enemy will heal the marked god for 2% of your max health once per basic attack, and this has a cooldown of 10 seconds, so essentially as permanent uptime if you're continually applying the mark on cooldown. Gonna be a weird item to fit into builds, I feel like. I guess this is made specifically for Cupid support. There aren't very many other characters that can make super good use of this, I don't think. I assume you can't mark yourself with it, otherwise it will be insane on like auto attack solo laners and stuff, but I assume you have to mark a different ally, so it'd probably be weird to use as a solo laner. Rod of Asclepius is coming back as well in a very similar form, but with a new active effect compared to Smite 1. So this has 55 int, 300 health, 3 health regen for 2450 gold. The passive, allies within 8.8 meters have 15% increased healing, very similar to Smite 1, but the active removes and prevents all anti-heal effects for 3 seconds for all allies within 7 meters with a cooldown of 90. So yeah, they added Aphrodite, they're also going to add this kind of an item in the same update. It's probably going to be pretty powerful. Healing is already really strong in the game, which means anti-heal is also really strong, so if people are building strong anti-heal against you, this can completely negate it for 3 seconds. So basically for one of your heals, or like 1 or 2 of your heals, you're going to be able to completely negate that anti-heal effect. And finally, Shield Splitter. This is the one I'm most excited for, I think. So 2600 gold, 40 strength, 25 of each prots, and active, throw a shield in front of you, dealing 40 plus 5 per level true damage to the first enemy god hit. If they have a shield, it is reduced by 50%, and you gain shield equal to the amount reduced, and a cooldown of 15 seconds. So yeah, already this seems like a really strong item. Like, even not into shields, it seems like a relatively strong item, just because the base stats are pretty decent, and this deals like 140 true damage, which is going to be really important that it's true damage. Even against squishies in Smite 2 with base protections, they mitigate almost half the damage they take a lot of the time, so this is definitely going to be really powerful. You know, you can almost double the amount of damage this is dealing if it was dealing physical or magical damage, and against tanks, obviously, that's going to be even better. So just the damage alone on this for such a short cooldown, like, this is a sort of a standard ability cooldown at 15 seconds. But yeah, of course, playing into shields, you know, playing into stuff like Yamoja or Odin or whatever, and, you know, obviously other characters when they get added, like Nike, this is going to be pretty insane. This is going to completely destroy Nike tricky when she gets added. But yeah, cool to see. Anti-shield is something we've been calling for in the game for a while. There's some characters that are just really oppressive, most notably Umoja, but some as well, some others as well. Moving into item balance though. So first up, cooldown rate is getting some pretty substantial nerfs in this patch. So the tier 2 cooldown ring is going from 15 down to 10. Bracer of the Abyss is kind of getting a mini rework. So they've removed the cooldown rate. The passive now triggers on basic attacks as well as abilities. They have decreased the damage per stack from 15 to 10, but increased the stack count from 4 to 6. So this is a small change from the preliminary patch notes that we saw a few days ago. It was going to be 8 max stacks. It's now going to be 6. So the basic attack damage hasn't changed, but they've removed the cooldown rate and it now triggers on basic attacks as well, which is going to make it a lot more attractive for like standard intelligence-based ADCs. Breastplate of Valor is 200 gold cheaper. They have increased the physical prop by 5, and it says they've not touched the cooldown rate. So interestingly, it seems like they've reverted a lot of the cooldown changes that have been made, or that were going to be made based on the preliminary patch notes that we saw. Because Breastplate was going to go down from 25 to 20, but it seems like they've kind of reverted that. Same thing with Chronos Pendant. They have decreased the cost, but also decreased the intelligence, but not touched the cooldown on it whatsoever. This was originally going to go from 25 to 20, so it seems like they have reverted some of those cooldown nerfs, which honestly, I do think is a good idea. I think with the cooldown rate nerfs that they were going to implement into the game, cooldown rate was just going to be so terrible. Like the main issue with cooldown, I've gone over this in previous videos, but the main issue with it is that you can get up to like 50 and 60% cooldown very easily without like sacrificing anything else in your build. But in terms of actually getting to like a decent amount of cooldown, like 30 or 40% compared to what you would do in Smite 1, it's actually a bit harder to do that. And with the nerfs that they were going to implement, taking like Breastplate and Chronos from 25 down to 20 and similar changes for other items, it was going to be really hard. It was going to take like 4 or 5 items to be able to get to 40% cooldown reduction compared to like 2 or 3 items in Smite 1. So I do actually like that they're not going so heavy on the cooldown rate changes. It looks like some items are still getting a nerf to their cooldown rate, but they're not doing as much as they were going to do in those preliminary patch notes that we saw. Conduit Gem is getting a nerf, so it now deals half damage to gods in its true damage and reduce the mana regen from 2 to 1. That's interesting. I don't see anyone building Conduit Gem. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. Normally people go Sands, but I guess with cooldown getting nerfed, you might not want to go Sands as much. Maybe it's more of a preemptive nerf, or maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe Conduit Gem's OP and everyone's building it. I haven't seen it much though. Gem of Focus, they have decreased the cooldown rate from 20 to 15, which is understandable. Gem of Focus was one of the premier, like, most annoying cooldown rate items because it allows you to spam abilities super often, and it also gives you movement speed every time you spam abilities. Movement speed's also a very annoying stat, so it's understandable that this is specifically one of the cooldown rate items that they did nerf. As I said, we got preliminary patch notes a few days ago. You might have seen that video. They were going to nerf almost every cooldown rate item in the game, and it seems like they're only now nerfing specific cooldown rate items that are kind of a problem. So Genji's Guard gets a cost reduction, but also a cooldown rate nerf from 20 down to 10. So this is more in line with like where Genji's Guard was at in Smite 1 in terms of just having 10 cooldown rate instead of 20. Glad Shield goes from 20 down to 10 as well. I do agree with this change. Glad Shield is just a ridiculously broken item, and if you're going to nerf the cooldown rate on anything, Glad Shield is one of the first up in my opinion, along with Gem of Focus. For Glad Shield, they have also decreased the passive damage to only be 25% of your item props instead of 30, because that was really strong as well. Haste of Vitalis, they have increased the cost by 150 gold and decreased the movement penalty decrease per stack from 33 to 25. So it seems like I initially thought when I saw this change they were going to make it max stacks 4, but they're not doing that. It's still going to be max stacks 3, so ultimately the maximum amount you can get to with Vitalis now is 75%, which I think is a good change. I think the item's probably dead now. I don't think there's any reason to build it when it's this expensive and only gives you 75% at maximum. It's still going to be annoying to play against, but I do think it'll fall out of ADC builds with this much of a nerf, which you won't find me complaining about, dude. It's a super annoying item. I'd rather just remove it, to be honest, but killing it is, I guess, almost as good as removing it. Heartseeker is getting 50 more mana for a tier 2 upgrade stat loss fix. Helm of Darkness now gives the Phantom effect for the duration, which is pretty cool, so you can use this now to counter like your Mojo walls or Thor walls or your Mir walls or whatever. Relatively small change, not going to impact things too much. Jotun's Revenge goes from 2600 to 2400, which is good to see. They've not nerfed the cooldown rate. This was, again, another item that in the preliminary patch notes, they were going to nerf the cooldown rate on it from 25 down to 20. It's going to be staying at 25. And it gets this 200 gold cost reduction, which I think is really good because it felt really bad for like strength-based jungler builds are already pretty bad for the most part, and it felt really bad to build like 2600 gold just to get some CDR online in the early game. Tekokagi is like 2700, similarly expensive. So it felt really hard to get any kind of like strength-based ability cooldown in the early game for junglers, so I like this change a lot. Phantom Shell, they have reduced the cooldown by 20 seconds. Pharaoh's Curse, they have increased the cost by 100, decreased the active slow and attack speed slow by 5%, which is good. Pharaoh's Curse, one of the most popular active items in the game, one of the most popular items in the game in general, to be honest. It's just really strong for how low the cooldown is on the active effect. Prophetic Cloak, they have increased the procs by 5, but decreased the cooldown rate by 5. Again, this is another one that I think if you were going to nerf cooldown rate on anything in the game, this is probably something you should look at. Prophetic Cloak is super strong right now. And of course, in Smite 1, it was a 10% item instead of a 20% item, so seeing it be on 20 was kind of insane. I think down to 15 is a good change. Sands of Time, they have decreased the cooldown rate by 5, sorry, to 10. They have also increased the mana regen as well on it and decreased the minion damage per ability from 15 to 10. So yeah, I guess the Conduit nerf, you know, maybe they were expecting everyone's going to start building Conduit if Sands of Time gets nerfed this heavily, which is getting nerfed pretty heavily here. You don't really care about the mana too much. Mana's kind of a fake stat in Smite 2 already, so it's basically losing 5 cooldown rate and 5 minion damage, which is pretty substantial. Shield of the Phoenix is getting a shift. They have increased the physical protections and the health, but taken the cooldown rate again down from 15 to 10. Honestly, Shield of the Phoenix, I think, is one that probably could have stayed at 15. I don't think that was a major issue. Shogun's getting 150 gold cost reduction. Soul Gem is getting cooldown rate hit as well, which Soul Gem, again, I think is another one that, like, if you were going to hit cooldown rate, you should probably hit it from Soul Gem. And that's really the difference between this and the preliminary patch notes that we saw. In the preliminary patch notes, they just hit every cooldown rate item in the game, pretty much. You know, stuff like Jotun's was getting a cooldown nerf, even though it wasn't a particularly strong item anyway. And so it's nice to see that they're more so looking at nerfing the specific cooldown rate items that are a problem right now and not just nerfing cooldown rate completely across the board. I do still think these changes are a little heavy-handed, honestly, and I would rather see a change to the formula where they made it so you get more DR if you're trying to stack up to like 50-60% cooldown reduction. Because even with these changes, it is going to be substantially harder to hit 40% cooldown in Smite 2 than it was in Smite 1. But yeah, if you're going to hit anything, Soul Gem is definitely at the top of the list. Soul Gem is an incredibly good item at the moment. Stone of Binding, they have decreased the cost by 250, but removed the health. Probably not a trade in the item's favor, I don't think, but it is nice that it's not so expensive now. Talisman of Purification, they've hit the cooldown rate, which I don't like, actually. I know this is a really strong item. It's being built a ton, but that's because the effect is so strong. I would rather see either like a reduction to its health or a reduction to its magical pro or something like that, just because cooldown rate is quite hard to come by in support builds, and I don't think you really need to nerf cooldown rate in support builds, more so than you need to nerf it in other areas like mid and solo lane. You know, it's kind of a similar argument to Jotun's not getting a cooldown rate nerf, which I think is good because cooldown rate is actually a bit harder to come by in strength-based jungler builds. And it's the same in support builds. It's actually quite hard to come by cooldown rate in support builds, so nerfing this is just going to make them even smaller access to cooldown reduction. But yeah, I do understand wanting to nerf Talisman of Purification. It is a really strong item with a really strong effect that's being built not only in support but also in solo lane builds sometimes, even occasionally on junglers. Cosmic Horror is getting a shift, so they have increased the int by 5, the mana by 50, the mana regen by 1, but also decreased the cooldown rate and the intelligence threshold. Cosmic Horror, again, is one I don't think they needed to hit, to be honest. I think it was kind of fine. Like, Cosmic Horror was sort of meant to be there as, like, this big cooldown rate bomb, whereas now it only has 20 cooldown rate on it. I think this would have been fine to stay at 25. It kind of fell out of a lot of builds anyway, to be honest, so I think it would have been fine to stay where it was. Crusher is getting shifted as well. This is another one that they didn't change in the initial patch. They have decreased the cost by 100, increased the strength by 10, but decreased the cooldown rate by 5, which I think is fine. Crusher never even had cooldown rate on it initially in Smite 1, and it did make it pretty strong. The fact that, you know, it's an ability spam item that also had cooldown rate on it, those items are particularly strong. You know, look at Glad Shield and Soul Gem and stuff like that. So, you know, where they have double synergy like that, where they have an active or passive that makes you want to spam abilities and then also have cooldown rate on them, that's really strong. So it's understandable to see Crusher nerfed. And finally, for items, Void Shield and Void Stone are getting an increase to their percent reduction, which is a little bit scary in my opinion, especially for Void Shield. I think this is a really good item now. It was already quite good, and like 15% pen is just nuts. I could honestly see a meta where like ADCs and junglers start picking up Void Shield instead of Titan's Bane because it's only 5% less pen now, or maybe even like Void Stone as well in mid builds, because it's only 5% less than Titan's Bane and Obsidian Shard. And of course in Smite 2, Titans and Obsidian Shard don't have that bonus passive where you get an extra 20% on your first ability, and the base stats on Titans and Obsidian Shard are just like 40 strength and 70 int or something like that. So the base stats are much more attractive on these items, and you only lose 5% pen. I could honestly see a meta where people pick up these instead of Titan's Bane and Shard, even on damage dealers. I think these are going to be really strong with this increase. But yeah, that is it for the patch notes. A lot of changes are very similar to the ones that we saw in the initial notes, but they have made a lot of tweaks based on feedback. Some items like Jotuns aren't getting nerfed in their cooldown, and Chronos Pendant and Breastplate of Valor not getting nerfed in their cooldown. And then a few others have been added that weren't getting nerfed before, like for example Shield of the Phoenix, Soul Gem. Actually, Soul Gem might have been in the initial notes. Cosmic Horror wasn't, though Crusher wasn't. So yeah, definitely some impactful changes there, and definitely an improvement from the initial notes that we saw, in my opinion. But yeah, there you go. That is the closed Alpha 8 update notes and my thoughts on it. As I said, I'll be live on Twitch probably as this video goes out, streaming some of the new patch. So I'll come over and say hi, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.